The Arizona sun beat down on Hemlock Farm. Old Man Hemlock wiped sweat from his brow. He surveyed his fields with a satisfied grin. Cornstalks stood tall and strong. Pumpkins, fat and orange, dotted the landscape. Watermelons, bigger than any he'd seen, promised a sweet reward. Hemlock had farmed this land for 50 years. He knew its secrets, its rhythms. But this year was different. This year, he had a secret weapon. A scarecrow, unlike any other, stood guard over his crops. It kept the crows away, it kept the rabbits away, it kept everything away. Fashioned from weathered wood and twisted metal, the scarecrow was a menacing sight. Its head, a grinning skull, stared out blankly with hollow sockets. Rusty farm tools formed its limbs, ending in sharp, pointed edges. Hemlock had dressed it in tattered clothes, soaked in a mixture of garlic, pepper, and other pungent herbs. The smell alone was enough to ward off most pests, but it was the scarecrow's eyes that truly instilled fear. Hemlock had embedded 2 polished stones, found deep in the desert, into the skull's sockets. In the sunlight, they glittered with an eerie, almost lifelike glow. Across the dusty road, 2 pairs of eyes watched Hemlock's farm with envy. The Blackwood brothers, Jeb and Caleb, were known for their laziness and their spite. Their own fields were barren, overrun with pests. They had tried everything to save their crops, but nothing worked. "It ain't right," Jeb growled, spitting tobacco juice into the dirt. "That old coot's got something special protecting his fields." Caleb, his face contorted in a sneer, nodded in agreement. "He's probably using some kind of illegal magic," he muttered. "We got to get our hands on that scarecrow and find out its secret." Night fell over the desert, cloaking the land in an unsettling silence. The stars above twinkled faintly, casting a ghostly glow over the barren landscape. The wind whispered through the cacti, adding to the eerie atmosphere. Under the cover of darkness, the Blackwood brothers crept towards Hemlock's farm. Their footsteps were barely audible on the dry, cracked earth, and their breaths came in quiet, controlled puffs. They moved like shadows, blending seamlessly with the night. Jeb carried a burlap sack, big enough to hold a man, let alone a scarecrow. The sack was old and worn, its fabric frayed at the edges, but it was sturdy enough for their sinister purpose. Their plan was simple: steal the scarecrow, unravel its secrets, and use them for their own gain. They had heard rumors about the scarecrow's mysterious powers, whispers of dark magic and ancient curses. They reached the field and stared up at the menacing figure. The scarecrow stood tall and imposing, its tattered clothes fluttering in the breeze. Its eyes, made of old buttons, seemed to follow their every move. Even in the dim moonlight, the scarecrow seemed to radiate an aura of dread. It was as if the very air around it was charged with a malevolent energy, making the hairs on the back of their necks stand on end. Jeb hesitated, a shiver running down his spine. He could feel the weight of the scarecrow's gaze, and for a moment he wondered if they were making a terrible mistake. "Don't be a fool," Caleb hissed, shoving him forward. His voice was low and urgent, filled with a mix of fear and determination. "We need to do this," he insisted. "It's just wood and cloth," Caleb reminded him, though his own voice wavered slightly. He tried to convince himself as much as Jeb. Jeb swallowed his fear, and with Caleb's help, wrestled the scarecrow off its post. The scarecrow was surprisingly heavy, its limbs stiff and unyielding. They struggled for a moment, their breaths coming in short, sharp gasps. They bundled it into the sack and scurried back towards their own property, their hearts pounding in their chests. The night seemed to close in around them, the darkness pressing down like a heavy blanket. They moved quickly, driven by a mix of fear and excitement, eager to uncover the scarecrow's secrets. Section 5. Torment Under the Desert Moon. The next morning, Hemlock discovered his scarecrow missing. Panic surged through him. He searched his fields, his heart sinking with each passing moment. The crows, sensing the scarecrow's absence, began to descend upon his crops. Rabbits nibbled at the edges of his fields, their noses twitching with newfound boldness. Despair settled over Hemlock like a shroud. He knew who was responsible. He had seen the envy in the Blackwood brothers' eyes, but he couldn't prove anything, and he couldn't bear to think what they might do to his beloved scarecrow. Section 6. Whispers on the Wind. The night was thick with an unsettling silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. The full moon cast an eerie glow over the desolate landscape, making shadows dance and flicker. Back at their dilapidated farm, the Blackwood brothers cackled with glee. Their laughter echoed through the night, a sinister sound that sent shivers down the spine of anyone who might have heard it. The farmhouse, with its broken windows and decaying walls, stood as a testament to years of neglect and dark secrets. They dragged the burlap sack into their barn, eager to unveil the Scarecrow's secrets. The sack was heavy, its contents shifting ominously with each step. The brothers exchanged knowing glances, their eyes gleaming with anticipation and malice. Jeb held a lantern high, its flickering light dancing across the barn's rough-hewn walls. The shadows it cast seemed to come alive, twisting and writhing as if they had a mind of their own. The air inside the barn was thick with the smell of old hay and something else, something metallic and foreboding. He untied the sack, revealing the bound and lifeless form of the Scarecrow. Its straw-stuffed body lay motionless, but there was an unsettling aura about it, as if it were merely waiting for the right moment to spring to life. "Let's see what you're made of," Caleb sneered, brandishing a rusty saw. The saw's blade glinted menacingly in the lantern light, its teeth jagged and cruel. Caleb's grin widened as he imagined the secrets the Scarecrow might hold. He brought the saw down on one of the Scarecrow's wooden limbs. The blade bit into the wood with a sickening crunch, sending splinters flying. Each stroke of the saw seemed to echo louder than the last, reverberating through the barn like a macabre symphony. The sound of splintering wood echoed through the barn. It was a sound that seemed to carry with it a sense of impending doom, a harbinger of the horrors yet to come. The brothers paused for a moment, listening to the eerie resonance. Suddenly a gust of wind slammed the barn doors shut, plunging them into darkness. The lantern flickered and nearly went out, casting the barn into an even deeper gloom. The brothers' hearts raced as they realized they were no longer alone. Jeb and Caleb froze, their blood turning to ice. Their eyes darted around the darkened barn, searching for the source of the sudden chill that had enveloped them. Fear gripped their hearts as they sensed an unseen presence watching them. A low, guttural growl seemed to emanate from the Scarecrow itself. Its eyes, once lifeless, now glowed with an otherworldly light. The brothers' terror reached a fever pitch as they realized the true nature of the entity they had disturbed. The night was far from over, and the whispers on the wind carried a promise of unspeakable horrors yet to come. Section 7. Retribution in the cornfields. The night was thick with an unsettling silence, broken only by the rustling of the cornstalks swaying in the gentle breeze. Terror lent the Blackwood brothers unexpected strength. Their hearts pounded like war drums, each beat echoing the fear that gripped their souls. They scrambled to their feet, dropping the lantern and the saw. The tools clattered to the ground, forgotten in their desperate bid for survival. They fumbled for the barn doors, their fingers slick with sweat. Every second felt like an eternity as they struggled against the stubborn wood. The growl grew louder, closer. It reverberated through the barn, a menacing promise of the terror that awaited them. It seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. The darkness played tricks on their minds, making it impossible to pinpoint the source. Finally, they threw open the doors and stumbled out into the night. The cool air hit their faces, a stark contrast to the suffocating fear inside the barn. They didn't stop running until they reached the relative safety of their house. Their legs burned, but the adrenaline pushed them forward. They slammed the door shut and bolted it, their chests heaving. The sound of their heavy breathing filled the room, a testament to their narrow escape. Outside, a sinister chuckle seemed to echo on the wind. It was a chilling reminder that their ordeal was far from over. The Scarecrow was no longer a lifeless effigy. It was awake. Its eyes glowed with an eerie light, piercing through the darkness, and it was coming for them. Each step it took brought it closer, its movements deliberate and filled with a malevolent purpose. Section 8. A Grisly Discovery. The next morning, the crows were strangely absent from Hemlock's fields. He ventured out cautiously, his heart heavy with dread. He didn't know what to expect. But what he found sent a chill down his spine. In the middle of his cornfield, impaled on a sharpened fence post, were two familiar-looking straw hats. Hemlock recognized them instantly. They belonged to the Blackwood brothers. He had seen them wearing those hats just yesterday. He swallowed hard, his mouth suddenly dry. He didn't need to see the bodies to know what had happened. The Scarecrow had exacted its revenge. Section 9. The Curse of the Scarecrow. News of the Blackwood brothers' disappearance spread through the small farming community like wildfire. Some whispered about a curse, an ancient evil that Hemlock had unleashed upon the land. Others spoke of a shadowy figure, glimpsed in the cornfields at night, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Hemlock kept his silence. He knew the truth, but he also knew that no one would believe him. He had created something monstrous, something far more powerful than he could have ever imagined. And now he was bound to it, forever linked to the horrors it had unleashed. Section 10. Terror in the Night. That night, as Hemlock lay in bed, his mind racing, he heard a scratching sound at his window. His blood ran cold. He knew that sound. He had heard it before, on the night the Scarecrow had been stolen. Slowly, he turned towards the window. A pair of glowing eyes met his gaze. The Scarecrow was back, but it wasn't there to protect his crops. It was there for him. Hemlock let out a strangled cry as the Scarecrow, its grinning skull illuminated by the moonlight, tore through the window, its sharp metal claws reaching for him.